Charles IX was a fragile king, crowned at just 10 years old and ruled under the eye and influence of his mother, Catherine de' Medici. Obsessed with keeping her bloodline alive, Catherine pulled the strings while Charles wore the crown. By his early 20s, their reign would be stained forever. In 1572, during the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre, Catholic militias and mobs swept through Paris, slaughtering thousands of Protestants, men, women, children, and the elderly. Some say Charles gave the order, others that he simply stood by. And darker whispers claimed he was so twisted, he drank blood and feasted on the flesh of the dead. Whether truth or rumor, one thing is certain: the blood of the innocent marked his reign. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for daily new videos. Charles was born on June 27, 1550. He was the fifth son of King Henry II and Catherine de' Medici. His mother, queen, widow, and survivor, was shaped by the rough world of Renaissance politics. She mixed prayer with influence, power with fear. Charles was never meant to rule, but fate cleared the path for him. One by one, his brothers died, some from illness, some from weakness, some from cruel chance. By age 10, Charles stood next in line for a throne already soaked in misfortune. In 1560, after the sudden death of his brother Francis II, Charles was crowned king. But don't be fooled. The crown may have rested on the boy's head, but it was his mother's hands that called the shots. Catherine influenced his every thought, whispering commands into his ear, guiding him as if he were her puppet. She had endured loss, exile, and treachery. She believed in omens, in stars, in destiny, and above all, she was obsessed with one thing: the survival of the Valois bloodline. To Catherine, keeping her family's dynasty on the throne was more than ambition. It was survival itself, no matter the cost. Charles, meanwhile, was delicate. His eyes seemed hollow, his hands shook, and his smile carried no ease. He turned to hunting, not for sport, but as if chasing or fleeing something unseen. He would return, covered in blood, grinning like a man possessed. He was a child already unraveling, and France itself was unraveling with him. The country was breaking apart. The Huguenots, French Protestants, demanded freedom. The Catholics demanded revenge. Nobles clawed for power. Peasants cried out for bread, and France was sick at its core, held together only by a fragile boy king. At first, Charles tried to bring peace. Treaties were signed, hands were shaken, but old grudges were too deep. By 13, he was already cracking. He lashed out at courtiers. He hid in closets. He wept before strangers. He spoke of black dreams, visions of fire, rivers of blood, and endless screams. Some said he was cursed. Others whispered his mother fed him potions that kept him weak and easy to control. Whatever the truth, the boy was slipping. Then came the wedding that was supposed to heal France. In 1572, Catherine arranged a match meant to bring Catholics and Protestants together. Her daughter, Marguerite of Valois, would marry the Protestant Prince Henry of Navarre. Paris prepared for joy. Bells rang, nobles filled the city, music lifted into the air. For a moment, hope seemed real. But behind the smiles, knives were being sharpened. Catherine feared the Huguenots' growing strength. She feared Henry of Navarre. And she feared losing her grip on Charles. The court was a battlefield. The powerful Catholic House of Guise demanded Protestant blood. The Huguenots demanded protection. Charles only wanted silence. This was when the first cracks began to show, his mind starting to unravel under the weight of it all. The voices in his head grew louder. He locked his doors, spoke to mirrors, and saw things no one else could. At just 22, the first signs of his downfall were plain to see. He moved like a ghost, mourning himself before the end. Then came the night of August 23rd, 1572, the eve of St. Bartholomew's Day. Paris was already tense. Just days earlier, Admiral Gaspard de Coligny, leader of the Protestants, had survived an assassination attempt. His wounds enraged the Huguenots, and Catherine feared they would strike back. The powerful Catholic House of Guise pushed for action, warning that Protestant leaders gathered in Paris for the royal wedding posed a deadly threat. That night, the first blow was struck. Admiral Coligny was dragged from his bed and murdered. His death was the spark. With the king's silence, the gates of Paris opened, and chaos poured in. For days, Catholic militias and mobs swept through Paris. To them, the assassination of Admiral Coligny was the green light they had been waiting for. They poured into the city, armed with blades, clubs, and guns, ready to finish what had been started. Homes were broken into, churches desecrated, and the streets ran with screams. There was no mercy. If you were Protestant, it didn't matter if you were noble or peasant, man, woman, or child, you were marked for death. Bodies piled in alleyways, and the Seine carried the dead like debris after a flood. Thousands perished. Charles and Catherine did nothing to stop it. Some whispered the king himself gave the order in a fit of rage. Others said Catherine pushed it through. But one thing was certain. The crown was complicit, and the blood of the Huguenots stained both mother and son. Then the darker rumors spread. They said Charles drank the blood of the dead, that he asked for a child's heart on a silver dish, that he bit into human flesh. One servant swore he laughed as blood ran down his hands. Records don't prove these things, but whispers spread across Europe. The image of a cannibal king was born. Whether lie, myth, or metaphor, it was enough. By the end, Paris was a grave. The massacre raged for nearly a week, leaving thousands of Protestants dead. When the killing finally stopped, the city reeked of blood and smoke. Charles himself began to crumble. At first, he tried to stand firm, but guilt, or madness, soon ate him alive. He claimed to hear the voices of those lost in the purge, whispering in the walls, calling his name in the night. He stopped bathing. His clothes grew filthy. His hands trembled. He whispered the names of the dead and wrote letters about a great hand dripping upon my crown. He was just 23, but his face looked decades older. Catherine tried everything to cure him. Potions, priests, astrologers. Nothing worked. France was ruled by a shell of a king. By early 1573, even the palace felt cursed. Fontainebleau, once alive with music and splendor, became a tomb. Courtiers whispered. Servants crept like shadows. The king was no longer just sick. He was frightening. Sometimes he broke into wild laughter that echoed through the stone halls. Hours later, he sobbed in a corner, swearing his sheets were stained with blood no one else could see. His fear infected everyone. Paranoia followed. He believed his food was poisoned and refused to eat unless Catherine tasted it first. Servants were beaten for walking too softly, then beaten again for walking too loud. No one knew what would set him off, only that something would. France no longer had a king. It had a curse in royal robes. Doctors spoke of melancholy or imbalanced humors, but the truth was clear. Charles was fading. He coughed blood daily. His body grew thin. His eyes stared at corners, as if someone waited in the shadows. One night, a chamberlain found him upright in bed, whispering to painted portraits on the wall, "They are coming for me with knives." Still, Catherine would not let go. Power was her breath. Charles was her final thread. She prayed, schemed, and dosed him with medicines. But the world had already judged. The St. Bartholomew's Day massacre horrified Europe. To Pope Gregory XIII, though, it was a victory for the Catholic faith. He celebrated the slaughter of heretics, ordered a Thanksgiving Mass in Rome, and even sent Catherine a golden rose in gratitude. But outside of Rome, the reaction was far darker. Protestant nations, England, the Dutch, and the German states, saw the massacre as proof that France had turned monstrous. Pamphlets spread across Europe, branding Charles a new Herod, the biblical king who murdered children. To them, he was not a ruler but a devourer of the innocent. Even some Catholic rulers recoiled, shaken by the scale of the bloodshed. Charles felt the judgment. He began confessing to crimes no one had asked about. In meetings, he begged forgiveness from stunned courtiers. He grew obsessed with one mournful song about angels, demanding it be played again and again. He mouthed apologies to the dead. Not even Catherine could reach him. Her whispers no longer held power. The ghosts had come. At least to Charles they had. Faceless men in blood-soaked robes. Admiral Coligny's eyes burning from the fireplace, children's cries behind the walls. He swore his bed floated at night. He clawed his skin raw in the mornings. The doctors bled him, starved him, leeched him. Nothing helped. In 1570, Charles married Elizabeth of Austria, a match arranged and approved by Catherine to strengthen ties with the Habsburgs. Elizabeth was gentle and devout, but the marriage was distant. Charles's paranoia and moods kept them apart. Where he showed little warmth to his queen, he revealed another side with his mistress, Marie Touchet. She was no royal, just the daughter of a provincial official. But with her, Charles seemed almost human again. He called her my angel, my star in the dark, and with her, he fathered his only known son, Charles de Valois, in 1573. The boy could never inherit the throne, marked as illegitimate, but Charles adored him. After the king's death, Catherine took charge of the child, and he later grew up to hold noble titles but lived in the shadow of his father's cursed name. For a brief time, love had steadied Charles, but not for long. The court shifted as Charles's health declined. His coughing fits grew worse, and everyone could see he was wasting away. Catherine, always thinking of the dynasty, began quietly grooming her next son, Henry, Duke of Anjou, to take the crown when the time came. At the same time, the powerful Catholic House of Guise, already the loudest voice behind the massacre, was rising in influence, eager to dominate France through their hardline faith. Surrounded by schemers and sensing his own weakness, Charles felt the betrayal cut deep. He accused his mother of replacing him before his body had even failed, and in truth, he may have been right. By early 1574, his illness consumed him. He vomited blood daily, his breath grew shallow. The doctors said tuberculosis, though whispers of poison remained. Still, Charles clung to the crown. "I will die as France dies," screaming. In his last days, darker stories appeared. Some claimed he collected bones, kissed them, named them, and begged forgiveness from them. Others swore he bit into them in fevered madness. Was it true? No one knows. But the story lived. On May 30th, 1574, at the Château de Vincennes, Charles IX died. He was 23. His final breath, they said, was a scream. France did not mourn loudly. At Vincennes, where his body lay in state, the air felt more like relief than grief. Catherine wept in private, perhaps, but in public, she moved quickly. Before the body cooled, she summoned Henry home from Poland to claim the throne. There was no time for sorrow, only succession. Charles's body decayed, fast. His skin yellowed, his eyes sank. The smell was overwhelming. When they lifted him for embalming, dark fluid poured from his mouth, or so it was said. Perfume and incense could not mask the stench. He was buried in the Basilica of Saint-Denis among kings, but few attended. Fewer spoke his name. Charles IX had terrified France. A prince turned predator in rumor, a king of whispers and blood. When he was gone, most wanted to forget. But memory lingers. In Paris, people still told stories. The cannibal king who haunted the Louvre, barefoot and bloody-mouthed. Children born during the massacre dreamt of him in flames, crowned in thorns. They said his body never rotted because it had already begun rotting while he lived. They said Catherine made a pact with demons, trading her son for the survival of the Valois line. Madness, perhaps. But madness had been the mark of his reign. And what of the massacre itself? It solved nothing. It only worsened everything. Protestants across Europe were emboldened. Pamphlets painted Charles as a beast, not a man. Even Catholic rulers lost faith. After Charles's death in 1574, the crown passed to his younger brother, Henry, Duke of Anjou. He returned from Poland to rule as Henry III, the last hope of the Valois line. But France did not heal. The wars between Catholics and Protestants only deepened, and the powerful House of Guise grew bolder, turning the court into a nest of plots and assassinations. Henry tried to balance power, but in 1588 he struck first, ordering the murder of the Duke of Guise. The act enraged Catholic hardliners, and the king's days were numbered. The very next year, Henry III himself was stabbed by a fanatical monk. With his death, the Valois dynasty ended, not with honor, but with more blood. Charles was its darkest symbol. He was not only a bad king, he was a warning. A boy given a crown before his mind had time to grow. A son raised on fear and medicine. A puppet for a mother who chose legacy over love. So what do we make of him? Was he mad? Yes. History asks us to see not just what he did, but what made him that way. He did not rise alone. He was built by a system that praised cruelty until it grew inconvenient, by a mother who valued survival above mercy, by a country that asked for strength and then cursed the monster it created. This is the rot at the heart of unchecked power. It does not just break men, it does so with ceremony. Charles left behind letters and notes that show he knew he was unraveling. A boy begging, in his own way, to be stopped. But there was no escape, only the crown. And the crown always demands a price, so high even the devil might look away. Almost 5 centuries later, we still ask, did Charles IX truly eat human flesh? Or was that only a tale invented to explain horror? Was he a cannibal or a symbol? We may never know, but we do know this. The hunger in his eyes was real. The blood on his hands was real. The silence he left was real. Stones in Paris once felt his steps. Tapestries soaked his sweat. Halls remember his breath. If you walk quietly through the Louvre or listen near Saint-Denis, you might still hear him whispering, asking for forgiveness. Still hungry, but remember this. His tragedy was not only his own, it was also Catherine's. She did not swing the blade, but she set the stage. She poured the wine. She whispered into her son's ear until vengeance was all he heard. She raised a weapon and called it a king. Not out of cruelty, but out of belief that the Valois must endure, even if it cost everything. Even if it cost Charles. Charles IX is not just a grim chapter in history. He is a mirror. He shows what happens when children are crowned too young, when fear replaces love, when power demands obedience at the cost of sanity. He is not just a name. He is a warning. So remember him. Not for the bloody myths alone, but for the hard truth. He was real. It happened. And no one stopped it. History did not create this monster alone. People did. So what do you think? Does history create monsters, or do we simply allow them to exist? Because forgetting is easy. Remembering is the only justice left.